1 second. Yeah. There you go. Thank you.
Great. So again, welcome all. My name is Ron Renaud, and I am an account exec with Greenpages. Greenpages is a 30-year-old technology company, and Jay, I'm sure, is going to go through a little bit deeper. But I just want to mention that Greenpages is moving into Rhode Island next month, or this month coming, June. We're opening a new facility, which we call the Customer Experience Center, and it's going to be in Pawtucket, Rhode Island. Greenpages headquarters is in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and we have offices in Tampa, Florida, New York, Massachusetts, Charlestown specifically. And the Customer Experience Center basically is going to be where we stage all of our systems. So if a client or customer purchases desktop servers, whatever, and they want to test them before they put them into their environment, or they want to load specific software, everything will be going through Pawtucket, which Greenpages itself as a whole is about 350 people now. So pretty large, and there's going to be a lot of product moving through Pawtucket. So our interest in Rhode Island is deep, and we've made a significant financial commitment and a few other things we have going. We're actually also sponsoring a large donation to the new Rhode Island College CyberSecurity Institute that former Congressman Langevin will be chairing. So with that, I'll just turn this over to Jay Martin. And Jay, thank you for joining us this morning and bringing your expertise to my fellow Rhode Islanders.
Thanks so much, Ron. Can everybody hear me okay? Yay? Okay. Everybody see my screen? Ron? Jen?
No.
No?
Just,
okay,
no.
Hang on. Let me get that going. But you guys can hear my voice, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. See you.
Okay, great.
There.
All right. Let's put it in presentation mode, and away we go. So I think I spoke when, Jen, a couple of months ago?
Yeah, I feel like it was in the fall.
Yeah, it might have been in the fall.
December.
And December, yeah. And a lot has transpired since December. Greenpages acquired a company, Arcus Risk Management. They brought with them additional incident response services to help us combat cyber criminals, right? So we not only work on the protect side pretty deeply as we did prior, but now we've accelerated that emergency incident response, incident commander, ransomware negotiation, forensics analysis, digital forensics, and you know, being able to bring customers back up if and when they get hit by ransomware or malware. So we've expanded that since last we met, and since then I was talking to Jen earlier, and we've had 4 to 5 more in-depth incidents that we've worked on. I want to bring those to the table here, give you guys a sense of what it's like to get hit. And you know, there's a bunch of different, you know, perspectives that I'm going to bring. One from the bad actor side, one from the IT security, bringing the environment back up side. So hopefully this will be totally eye-opening, and you'll get a lot out of it. I was mentioning that I did do this presentation last week at an AWS users group in Tampa. There's about 45 people there, and it went over great. So let's get into it. So Greenpages, we've been around since, as Ron mentioned, since the early 90s, and we're a nationally recognized solutions provider. We also have a managed services practice, both from you know, your traditional help desk to NOC services to cloud services, you know, being able to watch and manage your spend on the cloud side, being able to help out there, and manage security services like your SOC as a service, all the way through you know, all those 4 quadrants. In addition, Ron just mentioned our our deployment center that helps out from a, shipping, building, life cycle management perspective within your company. So that's kind of what we do here. And I'll just move on to the next one. We have 7 pillars here that we focus our attention on. Cybersecurity and risk management is what I'm going to talk about today. Although cybersecurity and risk management encompasses everything we do and everything you should do as well. So when you're thinking about moving to the cloud, always think about that foundational level of cybersecurity, bringing security in prior to building it out, or if you've already built it out, making sure that it is secure, right? The cloud inherently is not secure. You have to do your due diligence to get there. All right. So again, this is why Greenpages, strong customer centricity, our technical breadth, and our services breadth as well. All right. So that's just about Greenpages. So I might have presented these slides, whoever was in on that meeting in December. And some of this might be, old to you. Old to you, but I just think I need to, before we get into, the great new world that we're in right now, I need to revisit the past a little bit, right? So how many people in the audience remember the I love you virus back in about 2000? Anyone? Ron, Jen?
I do.
I think I remember it. I think
You do?
we're just embarrassed to say we do.
Well, I definitely remember, and I think the analogy I gave last time was I got an email from my CEO. I worked at a managed services company back in 2000, and said, "I love you." I looked at it. I said, "No, he doesn't," because I think we just had a deep discussion about the direction of the company, and it turned into a little bit of a disagreement. So I knew it wasn't from him, although Liz, our database administrator, came running down the hall. Jay, oh my God. So she knew what she had done. She clicked on it. What this did, and this was pretty cool, although no ransom or payload attached to it, if you guys remember, for those experienced this back in 2000, is that it read all your contacts. And when you clicked on the email and you brought up the attachment, it would say, I love you, but then it would read your contact list and send this email out to everyone in your contact list. And then they would click on it and it would amplify, right? So one of those first email kind of worm viruses that was pretty prevalent that we all experienced. This went pretty viral. Again, no malicious attack here, no ransomware, no encryption, nothing like that, but it just showed how devastating it could be to an organization and how quickly it can move through the internet. The one that really I want to bring to the attention is WannaCry. WannaCry was a virus that hit us in 2017. WannaCry is very, very interesting from a bunch of angles. I covered this last time, but I want to emphasize it again. It was the first time that a virus was wormed and was exploited into 150 countries. Over 250,000 systems were affected within hours. And then it exploded from there, right? So this was ransom, right? They encrypted systems that had infected. It was able to worm through networks and throughout the internet. And it took advantage of Microsoft's Eternal Blue vulnerability, which had been patched. And this is an interesting story, right? That the vulnerability was discovered because the NSA was sitting on that vulnerability. Somehow information from the NSA got out, it got leaked, and bad actors picked up the vulnerability. NSA found that they exposed some information, they had some information exposed, and they had to contact Microsoft to patch it. Now, why was NSA sitting on that? I can only guess, right? And I'm not going to get into conspiracy theories here on this call. Well, maybe a little bit. But as soon as they were exposed, they reached out to Microsoft, and there was maybe a couple of weeks that we had to patch this one. So this was a pretty devastating one. The last one is the Colonial Pipeline shutdown. This is where we actually saw hackers being able to attack business systems within the Colonial Pipeline environment, IT infrastructure, and that caused the company to shut down the pipeline, right? The bad actors didn't even know they had a pipeline, but it just goes to show that, even if they don't know what's going on, it could have devastating effect to our country, right? To the United States and beyond. And we've seen this play out, over and over again with, what happened over in Iran a few years ago with that nuclear, shutting down their nuclear production. The FBI identifies currently that there's 870 out of 2,385 ransomware complaints. Out of those, in 22 were critical infrastructure organizations. So we have possibly an issue there, right, with our electrical grid, our oil and gas supply, and so on. So what's the current situation? Again, I always like to give the bad news before the good news, but this helps us set the stage for, what's going on out there, and helps us more informed where we need to protect our own environments and our own critical infrastructure, and what to do next. So this is through March 2023. You see this huge hockey stick spike there in that light blue, with 459 confirmed attacks, right? That's a 91% increase from the previous month, February. It's a 62% increase from last year through March. So that's insanity, right? So we're seeing, things get escalated. The bad guys are not slowing down. And unfortunately, they need to be right once. We need to be right every time. And it's tough for organizations and agencies, municipalities to keep up. So, I want to be able to show some succinct things you can do today to start your journey, and continue that on. Maybe something you can, begin at the end by tomorrow, showing up in your event. Here are the top notable malware groups so far through 2023. I'll talk about Lockbit, Royal, and Black Hat. Those three, and there was one other one that's not on this list, but those three are the ones we see over and over again. When I say that we've handled 5 incidents since the Lorenz group was the other attack that we handled in December that I think I spoke about briefly, that attacked a deficiency in the Mitel communication system, a vulnerability there. We've since seen, maybe 3 Lockbit attacks, 1 Royal attack, and 2 Black Hat attacks. So we're seeing a lot of this. And if you look at notable in the news, other companies that have gotten hit by these top 4, include some pretty heavy names, right? So just to keep it in your mind. All right. So what are they attacking? The most targeted sectors that you can see here. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but this is just for your knowledge. Industrials seem to be far and away the biggest since March 2023, and this is just this year. Healthcare moved to number 4. It's typically top on the list, but it's moved to number 4 thus far. So we'll see where we go with that. Government activity. The good news here is it's fairly low in the targeted sector. So we've talked about the past. Let's talk about maybe the near and future threats that we face so we can better prepare for what we're doing. Number 1, we have this whole concept of AI, right? ChatGPT. And we've seen a lot of examples of, researchers using these type of AI chatbots to create malware, to create malicious code. And if they're doing it for the sake of teaching us, hey, look at what this stuff, can possibly do, you can rest assured that bad actors are using it as well. So The other side of this is, and what I have here is just a picture of, we used to get those cryptic emails from our phishing attacks. Somebody sending us, bogus email saying, click on this link, you just won the lottery, or you just got locked out of your Amazon account. You can always tell because it was in broken English or, just poor grammar in general. But now, these bad actors are using ChatGPT to create elegant emails and just the ability to just cut and paste that into an email so it doesn't look as suspicious, right? To catch us off guard. So that's what's going on today. On the positive side, right? More and more companies are using AI and machine learning to detect anomalies in environments, especially, security, from a security observability perspective. So that's the good news on the white hat side. So, more to come on the AI front. Something to keep your eye on. Number two, we talked about critical infrastructure. This just came out last week. I had to throw it in here because this Chinese espionage group, Volt Typhoon, has been targeting critical infrastructure in the United States since 2021. They've been lying persistent in the environment undetected. We don't know why. You could just guess, but they're sitting idle, waiting probably for some event to happen where they could strike. So we need to be more and more diligent, especially if we have critical infrastructure, in order to protect possibly near-term or future threats from those types of bad actors, state groups and sponsored state groups in particular.
Hey, Jay.
Yeah.
Let me just make one comment. We're seeing a lot of bad actors getting into the infrastructure, as Jay mentioned, but especially if you have water and sewer treatment facilities, any kind of telemetry type systems, they're getting in through those systems where you typically wouldn't think is their first target, but it's definitely a target. I'll let Jay define, where it sits on a list. But if you're running water, sewer, treatment facilities in your community, it's something to be aware of.
Yeah, good point, Ron. We've seen some examples of that recently in the news. Certainly the electric grid is susceptible as well. And it's definitely a concern, right? So we'll keep you up to date on that. We'll make sure that we're posting on LinkedIn and other places to keep everybody abreast of what's going on in that space. The last one I want to talk about, does anyone know who these two guys are? I think I mentioned them last time. I just want to bring this up one more time. But does anyone know who these Bond villain lookalikes are? Anyone? Well, the guy on the right is Klaus Schwab. He is the founder of the World Economic Forum. Think Davos, where all the billionaires go, right? And the guy on the left is Yuval Harari. He's an Israeli historian. And these two guys are, when you hear them talk on YouTube and other places, they are frightening, quite honestly. And here's a video. Don't take my word for it. Fast forward to about three minutes on it, unless you want to listen to the whole thing. It's all eye-opening. And in this video, they claim that they have the technology to hack human beings on a massive scale. I don't know what that means. I don't know how they do it. I don't know if it's through the media or some other malicious methods, but this is something that's quite shocking and frightening, right? And they say it very gleefully as well. And it's kind of opened my eyes to a lot of things in the world. So that's something we need to think about and internalize and see how it resonates with us. The other thing they say in here is free will is over. Again, I don't know what that means, but if we're hacking infrastructure, we're hacking IT servers, networks, applications, endpoints, and people. What a future we have, right? So just listen, take it for a grain of salt, and let's do what we can to counteract this and other things out there. All right, so what's the motivation here? Number one, far and away financial gain, right? 71% of the organizations in this Kroll study that happened last year experienced losses through cyber attacks. I could say that this $5 million number is right on. One of the attacks that we jumped in on in March of 2023 exposed personal information about Fortune 100 companies that this company unfortunately got hit and leaked data. And they were asking for a ransom that got negotiated down to $5 million, exactly on the nose. So this really resonates with me. This wasn't a huge company either. It was a mid-sized company. They were able to recover their systems because they had some immutable backup. We'll get into what immutable means in a bit. However, they didn't want that data exposed on the internet. And so they ended up paying the ransom. And we'll see where that goes. There's no guarantee that if you pay the ransom, the bad actors will give you a decryption key, or they won't expose the data later on down the line. All right, I'm going to get into a little scenario that we ran into with yet another customer that called us. And again, these aren't cybersecurity customers of ours. These are either companies we've done peripherally business with or have heard about us word of mouth and called us to jump into action. The next one is espionage and cyber terrorism. We saw a couple of examples already that we've talked about. And last but not least, hacktivism, right? Look at me, attention seeking, look at my cause. I'm taking you down because I don't like your cause. You don't believe the same thing I believe. So those attacks do and still happen. I'm going to focus, however, for this presentation on the financial aspect of it. We're not going to get into the others today. So let's turn our focus there. Everyone knows what ransomware is, right? I think I've explained it a couple of times already in this meeting. I'm not going to take a lot of time here, but I am going to talk about how they make money from ransomware, right? And other nefarious means. Number one is they make money from companies paying to unencrypt their files. So in the 5 situations that I talked about, 3 of those companies didn't have true immutable backups that they could bring back to restore the environment. Therefore, either they were able to restore their partial environment, or they had to start from scratch. In some cases, that puts companies out of business, right? Unless you pay the ransom. And in a couple of cases, out of the 5, like I mentioned, the other one had to pay the ransomware because they just could not recover, right? They would have had to start from scratch, and therefore they would have been out of business. So, you have to make that choice, right? You have shareholders, you have people who work for you, you have customers. You have to really weigh all those aspects. So that's the number one way. Number 2 is double extortion. We talked about this last time. Not only do they extort you by encrypting your files, and you pay them to get the decryption key. There's no guarantee there that the decryption key will even work. But the second thing is double extortion. Double extortion means that before I encrypt, I siphon the data, exfiltrate the data from your site over to my site. We've seen them take it to box.net, to Dropbox, to DigitalOcean, to wherever, offsite, and then they take it from there and move it elsewhere to cover their tracks. So double extortion is, I want you to pay for us to give you the decryption key to unencrypt your files. But number 2 is, in order for us not to expose the data that we just took, you have to pay us for that as well, right? So if I have immutable backups and I can restore my environment, you're still going to pay. They're still going to demand you to pay the ransom because now they have your clean data unencrypted, unless you encrypted it within your backups and on your systems. So last is once they get that data, They then turn around and sell that data on the dark web to the highest bidder. So, there's another one. Somebody asked me in last session, how much should they bid up for account access, right, within an organization? Let's say another thing they'll do is they'll sell access to accounts. So I take your password, or I get into an organization, I find the domain admin, I dump the hash, I get the domain admin account. Instead of me as a bad actor launching, this two phase, exfiltrate and encrypt, I sell that access to somebody else, right? And so they make the money that way too. And I've seen it as high as maybe $15,000 to $20,000, depending on the individual or the level of access. Financial companies, obviously, are the highest on the list. The highest, bidder bids on those financial accounts in financial organizations. The next one is ransomware as a service. So bad actors create ransomware and they sell it to other bad actors so they don't have to write it themselves. All right. The other one is persistent access. Not only do they sell the account access, but if a bad actor gets access to a company, municipality, agency, whatever, and they have access to their systems, they, instead of them launching the attack, they sell that access, right? Hey, we already have 6 boxes under our control. They're responding to a command and control center. We'll sell you all this great access. You guys do what you want to do within that organization. Does that make sense? Pretty crazy, right? So let's talk about some of the techniques, tactics, and procedures that these bad actors do so you could be aware of them. And we're going to take each one of these and we're going to put in place how we're going to stop each one of these as they go, right? So let's get into it. Yeah, if you look here, the world will face 33 billion account breaches in 2023 alone. That speaks to that account access thing. And attacks are now occurring every 39 seconds. So, this is important stuff. So number one, social engineering. We see it over and over again. Out of the, 5 companies that got hit, 4 of them were attacked by social engineering. Okay. I'm going to see if I can explain one of them. One of them was a business email compromise. A third party that company does business with got breached, one of the accounts. That account looked at a contacts list and sent information over to this other account. This person got the email, started as a trusted person because they do business with them day in and day out, and tried to click on the link. It was actually a PDF. The PDF had an embedded link that went to a Russian website because we did the digital forensics. We knew exactly where it was. The Russian website was eventually taken down because, we got involved and we notified authorities, but that eventually got taken down. But the only thing that stopped the malware from downloading onto the system was Sophos. They had Sophos installed on this endpoint, and it just stopped. It stopped the URL from even launching. So you need to make sure you're instrumented, and we're going to get into that in the next slide. Number 2 is exploiting vulnerabilities. We talked about how the bad actors gain foothold into the organization, not only within external systems, but if I socially engineer you and I get your credentials, I get malware on your system, then I can move laterally. And we're going to talk about what that means in a second. And then take advantage of vulnerabilities within your environment to do that lateral movement. All right. It's a kind of a 2-prong approach here. The other thing they use is living off the land. So once they gain a foothold in the environment through social engineering or exploiting vulnerabilities or both, they remain resident, and they use tools that would typically go undetected by monitoring, by malware protection, and move around the environment as if they were a regular user. or an admin, right? So they try not to fire off all the alarms, so to speak, right? So one of the companies that got hit and got their systems encrypted, and this was last year, the bad actors used BitLocker, right? BitLocker is a Microsoft, encryption tool. These systems or the malware virus, malware antivirus system that they had on, didn't even blink, because hey, that's something that we use. So those are the kinds of tools they use to move around and do their nefarious deeds, so to speak. Lateral movement is, like I mentioned, once you get onto a system, the bad actors scan the network. They look for credentials. They look for text files that have passwords in them. They try to use those to get into systems, through RDP, through SSH, through, any other means, any other vulnerabilities, database, accounts, those types of things, to move from system to system, from data store to data store, right? And then once they get there, they try to figure out, all right, has an administrator logged into the system? So they do something called, they dump the credentials, they dump the hash, and then they try to do brute force against those password hashes to, see if there's, passwords that are, weak passwords, and so on. And then they keys the kingdom of that domain admin account. And once they get that, it's game over. Then they exfiltrate the data, like we talked about. They'll start covering their tracks. They'll remove logs, so you can't sniff how they got in. You can't find out what systems they were currently on to maintain persistence. You can't see what files they exfiltrated, right? So they try to do some cleanup here and some damage. And then last but not least, they launched the encrypt your data. Next step is they try to maintain persistence. In one case, we saw with the Lorenz group that they left behind a one-line PHP code that could be launched 5 months after cleanup happened to initiate the command and control all over again. Malware protection got wise to that and started scanning folders and file systems and so on for that malicious one-line PHP code. But these guys, man, they're tricky. They're tricky. And last but not least, they sell or expose the data for ransom. Make sense? Any comments, any thoughts, any questions?
Hey, Jay, I just want to underline one
Sure.
point that you made. Even when people get hacked and whatever their resolution is, they pay, they don't pay, whatever, it's very common that they do leave another line of code in there to hit them again at some given point in the future.
Right, right.
And,
No, that's a really good point. Yeah.
and I would
Yeah,
say,
and if you don't pay, Ron, they get pissed, right? They get very angry, and they will try to find a way to relaunch that code unless a complete and utter cleanup of the environment happens, right? Sometimes they try to stay resident within the backups with that code, and try to remain stealthy. So that's one piece of it. The second thing that I wanted to bring up is that even if you pay the ransom, so this happened in one situation where this company got hit by Black Cat. 3 months prior, they got hit by Royal. They got hit by Royal 3 months earlier, and that data was exposed. In the second situation, when they got hit by Black Cat, they sold that data over to Royal. And even though Royal had reached them previously, and they paid Black Cat, Royal announced that they had this company's information and were about to expose. So not only was Black Cat holding blackmailing them, but so was Royal now. So if I pay Black Hat, Royal could expose, so it's just crazy what these guys are doing. So you got to be careful with the payment. There's no guarantee that they won't release it now or in, some future time and expose that data. Make sense? That answer the question? All right, so lessons learned, key findings, what you need to do to protect your environment. Let's do it. Weak passwords. Let me give you a couple examples. We do a lot of pen testing, guys, a lot of social engineering, phishing, red teaming. We do it all day, every day. And I got this example from Randy Becker, who runs that group. This is a password, and you think it's nice and strong here, right? Because it has uppercase, lowercase, numbers, and symbols. We crack this in 50 seconds. And that's with our systems, right? We don't have an endless budget to, get these, GPU-rich systems, right, to be able to crunch away at to brute force. But we use dictionaries, we use, brute force attack, and so on. This took us 50 seconds to crack. All right. So one of the things I want to, bang the table on today is if you think you have strong passwords, you don't. If you think you're adhering to PCI, which is an 8-character uppercase, lowercase, and numbers, and you think that that's strong, it's absolutely not. You're wrong. Don't fool yourself. Even though PCI says it in, PCI 3, whatever they're on, you're going to get cracked. You're going to get hit. So you need to increase your passwords. I would say don't go any less than 12. Uppercase, lowercase, use a password manager. In the cases where you can, right, use the password manager to generate a pseudo-random password that if somebody held a gun to your head, you wouldn't even remember. Give me your Amazon account. Give me your account to your financial system. I don't know what it is. I can't tell you because it's too long. I can't remember it. So make sure you're using a password manager for you and your family. Make sure that you're using a password manager for your internal staff. And you're making, especially your admin passwords, super strong. Number 2, MFA completely through the organization. We find over and over again that not only are weak passwords, companies say, oh yeah, we have strong passwords, but sometimes their strong passwords are only on certain systems. They forget that there's SaaS applications that, they don't even have going back to Active Directory or SSO, single sign-on, and there's no way to actually put a password policy on those other systems, right? So they leave those in the hands of the business to maybe manage, which is just not a good idea. The other thing is MFA. A lot of customers, when we assess them, oh yeah, we have MFA, we have MFA. One of these customers we talked to said they had MFA. They did have MFA, but not throughout their whole environment, right? They had MFA only for a certain set of users. And once you get in, MFA is super easy to bypass if there's vulnerabilities on the environment. In the environment, there's always vulnerabilities. Every company has vulnerabilities. So just know that. I'm talking contractors, I'm talking end users, I'm talking admins, whether they're coming in through VPN or not, right? MFA. Make sense? Very important. There's really no understanding of what normal is anymore in the environment. We build up our environments. We try to meet a business need. We don't have network diagrams. We don't understand what normal business flow traffic looks like. We don't know what some of our business users are using for applications. They set up SaaS applications behind our backs. This shadow IT happens everywhere all day long. We need to get our arms around it. The time has come to figure out what's a normal communication traffic flow from our end users, from our applications to our databases, to our file systems, to OneDrive, all SharePoint, all of the above, right? It's time to get our arms around our SaaS applications and talk about least privilege use to these apps, right? There's a new day, and we need to get on this. Number one is assets aren't tracked. Dependencies to systems aren't tracked. And I'll tell you why this is important. If companies get hit by ransomware, we always ask, all right, if we need to rebuild their environment in a green zone and reestablish the business somewhere, what are your most critical systems? How many companies can answer that? I'd say 10 to 15%, right? They'd be winging it, right? So and then if you can't answer that, well, what systems make up that application, right? Who needs access to that application? Where is the data stored for that application? You know, it's a lot of questions to answer in the heat of the moment when you're under attack. And so having that all completed and understood and having a map to go back to is something critical. You know what I mean? I think we all remember that Apollo 13 movie, the scene where they're trying to recreate, they have all the parts on the table and they're trying to recreate, you know, what the ship looks like. And, you know, you don't want to get into that situation where, you know, you're scratching your head and trying to figure out which pieces fit together. The other one is vulnerabilities not properly identified and assessed. Again, we're not going to be able to, you know, we're not going to be able to patch all the vulnerabilities. I get that, right? I get that. But if we can't, are we identifying what we're exposing? And are we putting compensating controls in place to protect those systems so that this lateral movement can't happen, right? Or we're minimizing the effect of it if it does happen. How do you understand where all the vulnerabilities are? Well, first off, you have a vulnerability management program. Vulnerability management program is a process, right? It's how do we scan for vulnerabilities? How do we apply the right level of risk to those vulnerabilities based on the assets, based on what data is on those systems, based on the vulnerability that is exposed and where it is on the network, and so on. Until we get there, we really can't patch vulnerabilities. So we're playing whack-a-mole, right? So if you have a very small environment, no big deal, right? You probably patch everything. But if you have a larger environment, you can't get to everything, or if you patch something, it breaks an application or a service, which is, you know, 9 times out of 10 I see, you need to have a vulnerability management program. Last, you know, not last, we have a couple more here. Misconfigurations of security tools. All right, so this is a big one. It drives me nuts, but we have tools that we install on our networks to monitor for security or protect us against security, right? Malware protection. So the question is, does somebody have a question? All right, the question is here, who is making sure that these security tools are properly configured and doing some level of health check and audits periodically to make sure they're running, make sure the systems are protected in the way that you expect, all right? In 2 of the situations that we just jumped on from emergency incident response, in one case, Sophos was installed throughout the organization, but 1/3 of the systems disabled real-time protection. 1/3 of the servers disabled real-time protection. Why? Because they couldn't get their applications to run correctly. So instead of addressing the root cause, you know, opening up a ticket with Sophos, could happen with CrowdStrike or Sentinel-1, it doesn't matter, right? Instead of opening it up, having the developers work directly with Sophos, they just left, you know, the systems disabled. Sophos was installed, it wasn't configured correctly. Did the CISO know about it? Does the CEO know about it? Who makes that call, right? So that's kind of a scary scenario. So make sure you're auditing your systems and not just relying on, hey, we installed it, you know, set it and forget it kind of mentality. Supply chain third-party risk is huge. We just talked about a scenario with the business email compromise a couple of days, a couple of minutes ago. Another one of the accounts we worked on that how the malicious actor got in, exposed username and password on a customer accessing the company that got breached system. The customer's username and password that they used to log into this company, their username and password got breached. So this is a customer, right? This is part of that supply chain, right? Could be a third party, could be a customer. Once they got access, again, rinse and repeat from the previous slide, right? Over and over again. How did that end user get exposed? Social engineering, right? Phishing, whatever. Enter your username and password here in this website, win a free trip to Aruba. And away we go, right? So hang on one second. This all making sense, everybody? I told you I'd tell you about immutable backups. The first thing that after, the attackers gain a foothold and get administrative rights is they find out where you're backing up your data. They make sure that they encrypt that first and foremost so that you don't have a way to get out of paying the ransomware or that, first encryption payout. And so that's the first thing they're going to look at. So what we want is immutable backups. What does that mean? The backup is offsite. There's limited connectivity to that storage, right? The password that's protecting that storage is different than the domain admin password. Maybe there's no way to delete that backup. It rolls over the data, but there's no way to, even if you had administrative rights, to get into that data store, that backup, and delete the old backups. There's no way. So you want to look for immutable backups that do that, right? Protect you offsite in somewhere safe. All right. So those are the key lessons learned. The other ones I don't have listed here is a really strong incident response plan. One of the things that customers get us on when the incident first happens, we jump in. We have to instruct them who are you using for legal counsel. If data gets exposed, end users, customers, if you expose their PII, what do you think they're going to do? They're probably going to sue you, right? I mean, this happens over and over again, in this litigious, culture we live in these days. And so what you want to do is you want to get a good cyber lawyer. You want to make sure you're contacting your internal legal counsel, and you want to make sure that you contact your cyber insurer. Now, my understanding, Jen told me, is sometimes there's limits to your cyber insurance in the particular vertical that you guys are in. So you want to make sure that you're contacting them. They're not forcing you to use a vendor of their choice to do the incident response, that you have somebody ready to go. You have a law firm ready to go, and you have an emergency incident response plan that you can execute so that when you get hit, it's not this panic, right? Because I'll tell you, that's the last thing you're going to think about is, oh, who are we supposed to call, and what are we supposed to do? What are our key applications we're bringing up first? Who do we need to contact? What do we say to our customers? What do we say to our vendors, right? All that stuff should be kind of practiced, tabletop test prior to anything that happens. All right, does that make sense? I know I'm kind of running out of time here. I see something in the chat. Can somebody read to me what that is?
Oh, I wrote something, Jay. There's MFA was multi-factor authentication. Just
thank you. Yep.
But Jay, I want to just mention one thing to everyone. First and foremost, on the emergency response plan, couldn't highlight that enough. And a lot of people I know, especially some of the smaller towns, from budget perspective or people and personnel perspective, resources are limited. But Greenpages does have a staff, extremely competent staff that can help write this with you, for you, guide you through the process. We can do tabletop exercises, what happens, you
Yep,
know,
that's right.
if something goes south, et cetera. So there's a lot of things that everything Jay mentioned, we can do. I don't want to make this a salesy pitch, but Greenpages full service. We can take you to the cloud. We can do a hybrid migration to the cloud, any of that. So not going to get into all that. I'll just make this offer to anybody listening today. First and foremost, we can give you free of charge. We can do a scan on the doc web of your site. And some people I've dealt with said, oh, there's nothing out there. And then we find out, well, we see passwords, we see usernames, we see all their favorite shopping sites. It's amazing what your user community is on your system doing and what's on the doc web. So all of that we'll do gratis as a thank you for attending this morning. And just reach out to me. And there's another gentleman on this call, Evan Shaheen, and he can take you through that as well.
Yeah, that brings up a good point. Make sure your users and you know should be part of your awareness training, which I don't have listed here, but awareness training and phishing exercise in internal is huge, right? You have to do it. If you're not doing it, start now. But most companies are doing it today. You want to make sure that they're not using business email for their personal websites. Those days are over, right? Because how protected are those sites? We see users over and over again reusing passwords, and those passwords getting exposed externally, and then they try to attack your systems with their username and password. So use your personal email address for the login, and do not reuse passwords. Back to that password manager again. Good point, Ron. All right. Any other questions? I'm just going to leave you with the zero trust journey. This is something I know zero trust vendors try to sell you zero trust. Everybody's zero trust, zero trust, zero trust. This is a journey. It's how to put a wrapper on everything that I showed you. Immutable backups all the way through. It's a way to holistically approach from a business level protection within an organization. And it applies these three principles of least privilege use, verify explicitly, and assume breach within your organization. Again, it's a business strategy. It's not a technical one. It's not a security one. Somebody can't sell you a box and say, now you're zero trust or one solution. So consider it. Come talk to us if you want to know more about how to protect your environment, how to do some red teaming, manage security services and so on, cloud adoption, so on. All right, that's all I have.
Jay, thank you. And I just want to throw one more thing out there. There's a lot of times, most of you folks probably have vendors you're working with. We're not trying to replace them. We'll work with you on their side, whatever. But Jay mentioned a few times penetration testing, pen test. It's really good to have a third party do a pen test. And red teaming, probably most of you may not be familiar with that term, but that is pretty much us inside your network and seeing where your vulnerabilities exist. So things like that we'll be happy to do in conjunction with your current vendors or whatever. Or if you're looking for anybody for any kind of questions, just give us a call. If you'd like a follow-up one-on-one free of charge, we'll be happy to talk to you about your environment, tell us what you're doing, and maybe we can make some suggestions for you.
That's great. Thank you, Ron and Jay. That was super informative, and I'm sure it gave everyone a lot to think about. I just want to open it up in the last couple of minutes to see if anybody has any quick questions for our experts here. Michael, did you have a question? No? Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. Maybe what I'll do, I'm recording this session, so I'll circle it back out to everyone and share contact info for Ron and Jay if you do have questions. And you need other information or other ways to reach them, please just let me know. So again, thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Greenpages, and thanks to all of our attendees. And we'll see you next workshop Wednesday.
Thanks, Jen.
All right.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Fantastic, everybody. Thank you
Be
so
well.
much.
Yeah.